Make a fist? Well, you can do a lot more than that. Here's a look at the brand new McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse, the JLA's Build-A-Figure Plastic Man. The criminal, known as Eel O'Brien, along with a gang of underlings, broke in and attempted to rob Cole Chemical, but the police arrived on the scene. While Eel and the others fled, he was shot by a cop and exposed to an unknown acid. He managed to make it outside, but collapsed unconscious from the pain. When he awoke, Eel found his flesh was elastic, and he had no control over it, morphing into strange and frightful forms. I think Plastic Man might be the first rubbernecking driver that can still keep his eyes on the road. Just before we get a closer look, though, at the JLA's Build-A-Figure Plastic Man, the tape measure is going to tell us that the figure stands at 7 inches in height, or Plastic Man is 17.5 centimeters tall. Well, get a load of us, you and me. We all looked at the 4 figures that made up the Justice League wave, and through that, we, together, have all been building Plastic Man. I didn't want to keep also Plastic Man all kind of sharing the same space as the black suit Batman, so I, of course, did want to have a look at him separately. The other 4 figures that we've already had a look at, of course, is the John Stewart. A good-looking John Stewart. Sort of questionable why they chose to give him like that weaving in the texturing in his suits. I think they could have easily given just a smooth suit like the Hal Jordan we looked at before. We also looked at Blue Suit Superman, or Blue Superman if you prefer. A black Batman. We looked at him, in fact, the last review, and we looked at Hook Hand Aquaman. Now, this could very well be. You could select some of these for your JLA setup, or you can also as well choose these for your Justice League lineup. Some of my figures that I have in my Justice League setup right now, I've got the classic Blue Beetle. Can't beat him. Speaking of classic members, I now have my Hal Jordan in that setup as well. And even though I never really get the chance to bring him in, here's also what the figure looks like with Deadman. Now, because Plastic Man, of course, is the BAF figure from this wave, it means that he doesn't come included, first of all, like a trading card. Doesn't come included with a display stand, no. But what he does have also, though, is the benefit of swappable parts. Something I wasn't really expecting that the figure could have had, and to be fair, really, McFarlane could have easily just phoned it in and simply just included the figure with just the arms that he has right now. No way. He also comes included with an alternate head sculpt, too, but I did kind of want to start things with more of the simple look to Plastic Man before we make things all outrageous. Getting a closer look, though, at the figure, one of my most looked forward to figures, I think, from a BAF standpoint. He certainly doesn't have the mass, like, for example, like a Build-A-Figure like Clayface. I'm just throwing Clayface out there, even though Clayface really wasn't a Build-A-Figure, but you get the idea. Something of larger size would have made it a little bit more of an accommodating choice rather than a character that's really, for all intents and purposes, a regular size figure. You could say, like, for example, he could have just been a Platinum Edition or a Collector's Edition and still just include all the accessories. But I feel like I had a more rewarding experience actually building this guy, just because I was a big fan of Plastic Man. Now, all in all, though, he's a good-looking figure. There are a few little elements that we'll talk about, of course, in this review that, you know, maybe they could have done a little bit better of a job. I think the biggest takeaway for me, while I really do like the head sculpt on this one, this isn't going to be the head sculpt I'm going to be choosing to display him with when I put this guy eventually on the shelf. He has a defaulted, I don't want to say defaulted, but if you wanted to get just a regular-looking head, he's got a big smiling head with the large, of course, Plastic Man glasses. One of the things I really like, though, is that McFarlane took the time, knew the source material, and they added the little grid marks that he has usually on his glasses. That's a nice little touch, too. Smile is good. I even may have even mentioned when we were looking at, was it the black suit Batman? I said that, now I know he's older now, but Bruce Campbell, back in the day, a young Bruce Campbell, we're talking like Evil Dead 1 or Evil Dead 2, even like Army of Darkness, Bruce Campbell then, would have been an ideal person to cast as Plastic Man. I think that opportunity has probably already set sail. He's a little older, I think, now to be able to play Plastic Man, but an ideal actor, if you ask me. That's who I would have picked right away. Head sculpt is really good on this guy. Now, again, he does have an alternate head that we'll look at more in a moment. From his body, now, here's the problem, the biggest and only real problem I have with the figure. While generally he does look really good, it's very more apparent that you can see that they printed on this part of his orangey red suit, and then they would have just relied on just molding this in the red plastic. There's definitely a divide when you're looking at the two. With not only this is more of a matte finish, but it's clearly more darker as well than his arms. I only bring this to your attention because it's about the only thing I would say I would have done differently. I mean, it's a harder thing to really pull off because he has, first of all, a really weird looking outfit to start off with. And obviously the easiest thing for them to have done is just molding this in the flesh tone plastic and then just painted the parts over top. Because of that, I mean, obviously looking at the arms and then looking at the torso, they're not quite matching 100% on the colors. He also seems to have a slightly darker color that they've used for the elbow joints. Again, I'm kind of just going through the boxes that I would check for things I would say are not a detriment to the figure, but things that kind of make the figure kind of removed from being a perfect looking plastic man. It's just, again, like the elbow joints are a little bit of a darker plastic, and just like the torso is clearly differently painted than using the plastic cast arms instead. The rest of the figure does look good, though, and there's nothing really at all I would have changed other than maybe wishful thinking, if anything. I wish that they could have included some other alternate arms, like, for example, just to give him some variations. I mean, obviously, too, with the way that the legs are designed, the legs were more of a harder thing to plug in place. I had to actually, in fact, heat this a little bit just so I could soften up the plastic for the socket. And I would probably recommend this too. If you're having a tough time when it comes to build figures, just to get the arms or the legs on them, if you're having a struggle, heat them first, just to soften up the socket. And then it's a lot easier, really, to attach the lower legs. So, in fact, I did that. The legs aren't going to be falling off at all. I mean, knock on wood, they're not going to be falling off at all. I mean, this is one thing that they probably could have not given them alternate parts. The arms are the easiest because, as you'll see in a second, the arms are so easy just to pop off the ball joints. These would be a lot harder to do. I can understand why they chose not to include swappable leg parts. I think that the legs don't necessarily need to be changed either. But though, if you wanted to change the things for Plastic Man, he comes with it. Whoop! He comes with this alternate head sculpt, which I just now dropped on the floor. Just retrieving the head. I don't know what was happening here. He comes with an alternate head sculpt. Now, unfortunately, one thing that he sacrifices in is because he's got the neck that's turned like this, they didn't opt to choose putting a ball joint on there. So you can't independently move the head from the rest of the neck. The neck and the head are all one piece. A bit of a bummer that this wasn't separately articulated, so you'd be able still to rotate the head as so that the neck and the head were two separate pieces. But I mean, obviously that would be involved more tooling and some additional cost, of course, of producing a separate neck to a separate head. The neck, though, and the head are as one piece, again, are different from the head sculpt that we looked at from before. Plastic Man, I feel, is also a little bit more like, was it like Jerry Lewis? Jerry Lewis, the comedian? Looks a little bit like him as well. Jerry Lewis was apparently a real nasty man, not only to some of his fans, but also to his kids as well. That's a separate discussion for another day. But to change out the heads, though, it's very easy. A lot easier than I was expecting. It's just a case of taking the head that he has right now, just popping off the ball joint. Just before we actually put this on, one thing I did want to mention is the way they've made the post. The ball joint is pretty small. The post is even smaller. It's a pretty thin post. I don't know how often I would really want to change the head. I would worry that that would start to snap the plastic. Now, the plastic is pretty gummy anyways, but just to changing out the heads, that's probably one of maybe the reasons why they decided to use a smaller or thinner post, probably just so it was a lot easier to change out the heads. But I just think that the post, I don't know, maybe I'm worrying a little bit too much. I mean, ultimately, I'm only going to be sticking with this head sculpt anyways. You could also, too, change out the arms, as that, unfortunately, Batman came included with not only the two heads, but also the alternate arms. These arms, I think, came included with what? Aquaman? I think it was Aquaman. But if you did want to use these arms, then he also comes with a lasso arm, which I also jokingly said it'd be good if he wanted to blow bubbles. He comes with one lasso arm, and he also comes with an elongated arm. Neither one of these, by the way, as I mentioned in the review of the Batman, just get this guy to stand here for a second, neither one of these do actually have a built-in wire, which I guess is not one thing that McFarlane would do. Has McFarlane ever really released a figure that had a built-in wire? I'm trying to think right now. I mean, one of the things that also would be, too, is that they would have to change out the material. Using plastic, probably just from head to toe, would be the easiest thing, to have to then source out a different type of plastic, because I think you have to use a slightly thinner plastic to accommodate a wire that's built into it, just so you could bend it. If you did want to bend this, though, as I did mention, you could heat this really in hot water. Just take a hot water bath, run a few passes as well with a hairdryer, just to soften up the plastic, just so you could bend. I think if anything, I would maybe soften up the plastic right around the joint of where his elbow would be, just so I could maybe bend it a little bit more in just an elbow, like a more of an elbow bend, so it wasn't just a long arm like this. And of course, with this one, you probably could do something very similar as well. I just like the idea that they gave us extra arms to work with. Changing out the arms is just as easy as changing out the head. You're just going to pop the arms off. The thing you want to make sure you're careful of, though, is while you're removing the arms, you don't remove these in the process. Luckily, they're fairly rooted in there, that when you're changing the arms, I haven't yet had this happen. Oh, great, now I've jinxed things. I haven't had this yet happen where when I pop the arm off, I end up dropping this on the floor and I have to go back and retrieve it like I did earlier with the head. These stay pretty close inside the cavity of the torso. That if you wanted to, then you could just simply take the arm that you want to use. Even though really he does make any form that he wants, you still don't want to follow the rule of thumbs. So I want to make sure the thumbs are facing the right way. This is going to plug in on the one side, and then we'll do the exact same thing on the other side. And you don't really even have to commit the idea of using all of the extended limbs either. If you want to use just like the head, for example, I know I'm telling you something you guys already know. I don't know if I would necessarily change. Maybe I might just have one arm as a normal arm. I mean, I like this, but I think I kind of just like the longer arm instead. So I might just maybe go using this arm and then just swap it out. And again, you can't change out the arms. You can't change out the hands, for example. Yes, they probably could have made these as a separate removable peg, so like the hands could come off, for example, and then you could use it with the forearm. But again, I know for the same similar reasons as using the head and the neck as a separate piece, it just would be a whole lot more cost of tooling a separate arm to a separate hand. So that's probably one of the reasons why they just molded it as all one piece. As he is right now, again, for the articulation, not that he does lose, obviously, now the articulation in the hand, but all the articulation pretty much would stay the same for Plastic Man. So he does have a ball joint. The head does rotate all the way around. Even if you were really to use this head sculpt, you wouldn't have any more additional benefit of a ball joint. The neck and the head are all still one piece. So again, like you've got your ball joint, it does rotate the head, up that high, down, back and forth. And again, you could rotate it all the way around. The upper torso is still going to be on a ball joint. It rotates all the way around. The figure does also have a ball joint at the base of the abdomen that allows the torso to rotate that way too. The arms are on hinges, and you can bring the arms out at 90 degrees. You can also take the arms and rotate them all the way around, Again, the only thing he loses now by having the extra length of his arms like this is that now he doesn't have a swivel, obviously, in his hands. If you had the original hands, for example, they would still be able to rotate like normal DC Multiverse figures would have. The legs do split, and they're on actually hinge joints on the inside. Again, took a little bit of time, a little bit of convincing to get those legs finally on there, but they don't look like they're going to be going anywhere. The legs go forward, the legs go back, there's a swivel at the top of the thigh. Once again, a double hinge on the knee. Now, again, the only other thing I would say, I know I was kind of talking earlier about color matching. The only other thing, too, is that you can see clearly they haven't quite color matched the plastic here. You got a much more smoother plastic and a slightly darker plastic for the thigh and the lower calf, but the knees are not only more of a matte finish, they're also a very different color than the tops and the bottoms. So there's a little bit of color matching issues there as well. And there's also, of course, Plastic Man's feet. You can very much see as well, like anything really hinging. The hinges are obviously a different plastic color, but again, you've got the hinge joint there for the ankle, and then you got the feet. So the knees go, again, forward and back on the legs. You got the double bend on the knee. You got the articulation still counting where it is on the ankle. You can rock it back and forth. And yeah, Plastic Man still has toe articulation. Nice to see that still, even though it's a BAF figure, the figure still manages to pull off toe articulation. And yes, he still has pegels on the undersides of his feet. So if you wanted to, you could make yourself use of a display stand. I mean, certainly there has been, like 4 figures in this wave? 4 figures in this wave. I just dropped Batman. 4 figures in this wave. All of them come included with display stands. Even though Plastic Man never really had a display stand, you could easily just, pillage one from another figure. Speaking of other figures, bringing in the other figures that we've already had a look at. Now, I've done this in the past. I'm going to try to do this as well when we look at future BAF figures too. I want to kind of rank my top 3 favorite figures from this wave. It's a little harder to do, obviously, because we only have really 4 figures. I'm not going to count necessarily Plastic Man, because Plastic Man is the BAF of this wave. But if I was to rank these in order of my favorites, I would probably go with like the blue suit Superman, or the blue Superman. I know I keep calling him the blue suit Superman. The blue Superman, I would go number 1. I'd go Hook Hand Aquaman number 2. And you guys probably already can see where this is going as well if I can get Aquaman. Aquaman has really been, of the figures, the hardest one I've seen to stand. I don't know, something about his ankles. But getting him to stand, he would be number 2. And then, of course, you already know my feelings when it comes to black suit Batman. I would go with John Stewart number 3. Batman, I don't know. I just don't feel like he belongs in this particular wave. I feel like he's a filler figure, essentially taking a mold that they already had in their inventory, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I just don't think it was the right choice of Batman to include in this wave. And I think, if anything, I mean, we've gotten really enough Batmans anyways that, did we really need a Batman in this wave? I mean, to have a Justice League wave, why not? They could have thrown Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman would be an ideal candidate. I mean, they obviously have released singular JLA members, but I think like a Wonder Woman would be ideal. I just don't know if I would always go and phone in the Batman button. I mean, Batman, we've gotten enough of the Batmans. I don't think he necessarily need to be part of this wave. And ultimately, though, he's not even in the top 3, even though there was only 4 figures from this wave. All in all, though, I really like the look of Plastic Man. I like the fact that they did at least take the time to swap out some of the parts. Yeah, again, like the color matching isn't quite 100%. The torso is clearly different from the arms. It's clearly different from the little trunks that he has down below. There are some color matching issues when it comes to like his knees and his elbows. Not on these arms, obviously, but some color matching issues. But I don't know, other than that, if there's anything at all I would change to the figure. I really like the look of him, and I'm glad we finally have ourselves a true DC Multiverse release, a Plastic Man. In the end, Plastic Man really didn't need to be a BAF figure in the first place. They could, I think, easily release this guy as either a Platinum Edition or maybe even a McFarlane Collector's Edition figure, including all the same still accessories, the swappable limbs for the arms, and then the 2 different interchangeable heads. Obviously, they would have probably asked a little more of a higher price than regular DC Multiverse figures, and hey, why not? I still would have paid the higher asking price in order to get this guy finally in my collection. I don't feel necessarily robbed that this guy was a Build-A-Figure. I think there's enough at least added accessories. Like Plastic Man, I think is a worthy candidate. You couldn't simply just take any just random figure. Like, if I'm looking at like Energy or Blues Superman, I would think like looking at him, the first thing I would probably say is like this guy never needed to be a BAF figure in the first place. Plastic Man, though, because he does have all these extra limb parts, because he's known for being stretchy and you can like elongate parts to his body, I think he, again, justifies being a Build-A-Figure. Could he have been released on his own? Yes, but I don't feel like at the end of building figures, the worst thing you can really do is when you're building any collect and connect figure, or like a Build-A-Figure, depending on which, what lines you're collecting from different companies. There's nothing worse than really when you get to the end of it and you think to yourself, this figure didn't need to be this. This figure didn't need to be a collect and connect. The figure didn't need to be a Build-A-Figure. I don't feel like I'm having that feelings at all when it comes to Plastic Man. The figure looks good. The figure has enough things going for him that I think justifies why you had to collect 4 figures, even though, again, like, I don't think the Batman was really a necessary inclusion in this wave. I don't feel like at the end of this, now having bought all 4 figures, that I feel like I'm robbed that Plastic Man was the end goal. I feel like I'm now justified to the fact that I finally get myself a Plastic Man, and the Plastic Man looks good. He comes with 2 different head sculpts. Neither one of them, unfortunately, do have independent articulation in the head. So the head and the neck are all kind of one piece. That's not a big thing at all. That's not a deal breaker at all. The figure does come included, again, with some swappable arms. So you can choose, at least from the top half of his body, how you want to customize the figure. You don't have to have necessarily both long arms. If you want to choose, say, one short arm, one long arm, again, you can do whatever you want when it comes to your collection. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to display this guy with the lasso arm. I think if anything, I might just display him with a regular short arm and then the long arm on the other side. I don't know. There's at least enough stuff going on for this guy that he has what I would always really say shelf appeal. He's the kind of figure that you would look at, you'd walk by the first time, you'd say, hey, that's it. Even if you don't even know who Plastic Man is, there's enough for him at least that when you're looking at him, you'll go back and take a second look. What do you guys think of Plastic Man? Let me know down below in the comment section. Do you feel like this guy should have been sold as a separate figure, or do you like the idea that he was a BAF figure? That's a Build-A-Figure, by the way. Let me know what your feelings are of Plastic Man down below in the comment section. And also, too, considering I did tell you guys my ranking of this wave, I know, again, it's only 4 figures. I would, again, have gone with Blue Superman, then Hook Hand Aquaman, and then, of course, John Stewart. What would you say is your top 3 favorite figures from this 4-figure wave? Let me know down below. If in the meantime you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and want to stick around for more, we're going to wrap things up right now, sad to say, for Plastic Man. But there are going to be more DC Multiverse reviews coming your way. And of course, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.